Good morning, welcome to Catex TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. Today is Friday, June 12th, 2015. If you want to follow us on Twitter, go to Catex TV. Yesterday afternoon, rather abruptly, the International Monetary Fund withdrew its negotiating team from discussion with the Greek financial people in Brussels. Later on in the afternoon, the IMF said that this does not mean they have given up reaching a deal with Greece. The European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said earlier this morning, quote, "I don't think one can interpret the IMF's action as meaning that the IMF will leave the negotiation." Juncker went on to say, "I spoke at length with the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras last night, and I'll probably do so in the days to come. I think a solution is necessary." Meanwhile, earlier today and last night, senior EU officials have begun for the first time to formally discuss a possible Greek debt default, as these negotiations seem as if they're headed nowhere. It's important to remember that the Greek financial contribution to the European Union totals only about 1.8%, and officials are beginning to argue privately that it's very unlikely that creditors would strike a deal on reforms with Athens in time to hit the deadline to disperse some 7.2 billion euros that remain available to Greece under the arrangement rescue program that was worked out back in February. This means without the release of money, Greece will be unable to pay its debts, and it will technically go into default, and ultimately will conceivably mean that they'll be pushed out of the EU. According to some of the people in the talks, it will require, it being the success, would require progress in a matter of days that has not been possible in weeks. There was another explosion last night in downtown Malmo, Sweden, a good-sized city in southern Sweden. This is the third explosion in downtown Malmo since December. 2 men were injured in the blast. A number of cars were damaged. It occurred in the neighborhood in the center part of town, close to the Medical University of Skane University Hospital. In February, a blast in the center of the town shattered windows and did damage to the Museum of Modern Art. And back in December, a series of explosions damaged buildings in the eastern part of the city. The police have no leads yet on who is detonating the bombs. Last evening, the twin-towered Koryo Hotel in central Pyongyang, which is a regular stopping place for international visitors, was reported to be on fire. Flames could be seen high up in the 43-story hotel, possibly near the bridge on the 30th floor that connects the two 43-story towers. Shortly after midnight last evening, a receptionist at the hotel answered the phone from a reporter from the Washington Post, and she claimed that the fire was over but declined to go into any details. International visitors said that several floors in one of the towers were burning and there was a lot of smoke. Pyongyang was experiencing heavy rainfall yesterday, and that might have helped put the fire out. The Koryo Hotel was built in 1985 and is a well-known landmark in Pyongyang, favored by foreign visitors. Malaysian Airlines had another incident earlier today. A Airbus A330 carrying 300 passengers returned to Melbourne Airport in Australia safely a few minutes after takeoff after an engine fire alert light went on. Upon landing and after an inspection, it had been determined that there was no fire on board. Malaysian Airlines, of course, has been involved in 2 air disasters in 2014, one being shot down over the Ukraine and the other one disappearing somewhere over the Indian Ocean, still not known where. Boeing Airplanes has forecast demand for over 38,000 new planes in the next 20 years. This is an increase of 3.5% over last year's forecast. Unfortunately, for business travelers, some 58%, actually some 60% of the planes that are going to be delivered are going to be single aisle airplanes, which are notoriously uncomfortable in most cases. The single aisle market continues to be the fastest growing overall segment of the market that Boeing is producing. Boeing said that a majority of the planes are going to be going to low-cost carriers. That would be the single-aisle planes. And there would be mainly Boeing 737-800 and in the future Boeing 737 MAX 8. So this is all lead up to the Paris Air Show. There's an amazing video on Google of a Boeing 787 doing essentially a vertical takeoff as part of a rehearsal for the Paris Air Show, which is coming up later this month. In South Korea, the Middle East respiratory syndrome crisis known as MERS is reaching significant proportions. The South Korean economy is reeling. Tourism has dropped off. Any visit to the internet will show squadrons of South Korean health workers dressed in white suits with respiratory masks, spraying some sort of anti-contamination everywhere in movie theaters and subways and railroad stations and streets, and basically carpet bombing neighborhoods from helicopters. Now, in the United States, health officials from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention are reminding U.S. doctors that if they find anybody who is very sick with pneumonia-like symptoms who has recently visited South Korea, they should consider MERS as a possible diagnosis. It would seem that people who are very sick with pneumonia who have visited South Korea within the last 2 weeks, which is what the guideline says, would be pretty easy to identify as a population group. That's the news for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. If not, we'll see you Monday. Have a good weekend, and thank you for watching.